Swiss and Scandinavian web design. Minimalistic, functional, and as precise as Swiss train schedules and Scandinavian furniture. Now, these styles shape some of the world's most iconic websites, but what makes them so influential, and is there really a difference between the two? Well, in this video, I'll try to answer all of these questions by diving into their history and exploring some iconic examples. So, stick till the end for some fascinating facts, and let's get into it. So we all know about the great things Switzerland is famous for, right? I mean, their watches, their chocolate, and their cheese. But there's another Swiss gem you might not have heard of before watching this video, and that's Swiss design. And no, it's definitely not full of holes like their cheese. And even though Swiss design has been around for nearly a century, its principles remain incredibly relevant to modern businesses. But why is that? Well, simply put, Swiss design takes complex ideas and presents them in a way that's easy to understand, making everything look good and organized. I mean, what brand could say no to this, right? But before jumping into the main characteristics of the style, let's first see where it all came from. The roots of Swiss design, sometimes also called the international typographic style, can be tracked way back to the 1940s and 50s, and this movement emerged as a response to earlier, more ornate and lavish design styles like Art Nouveau. While Art Nouveau loved fancy curves and natural shapes, Swiss design kept things simple, focusing only on the basics and embracing a modernist approach. Influenced by movements such as Bauhaus de Stil and Russian constructivism, Swiss design is characterized by its pragmatic, considered approach. Now, the famous Bauhaus mantra states that form follows function. Now, Ernst Keller, often called the father of Swiss design, played a key role in shaping this philosophy, advocating for a balance between artistic expression and practical application. Now, Swiss design can be characterized by several key elements. First would be the grid system, which is a structure made up of intersecting straight lines used to organize content. From posters to Swiss train schedules, grids were used to simplify content hierarchy and create an organized arrangement. As they say, patterns help bring order to chaos. Now, secondly, Swiss design places a strong emphasis on typography. Fonts here are for clarity and communication, not aesthetics. A very great example is the font Helvetica, which, fun fact, literally means Swiss in Latin. It's precise and very easily readable. Other popular sans serif fonts like Avenir also reflect this style very fondly, clean, functional, and free of unnecessary decorations. Next, you might also have noticed from the given examples that Swiss designers love asymmetry. They place elements off-center to create more dynamic and engaging layouts. Asymmetrical designs help highlight key elements and naturally guide the viewer's focus. Swiss designers also tend to favor photography over illustration to maintain a clean and modern aesthetic. Magazines like Neue Grafik demonstrated how combining photography with minimal shapes can produce bold and visually striking designs. And finally, in Swiss design, the use of white space and negative space, which is basically a fancy way of saying empty space, is an important part of the layout as well. It helps make the key information stand out and look way more noticeable. Of course, Swiss design has long outlived the print era, and its principles are now widely applied in the digital realm of web design. Take the simple grid layout, for example, which I mentioned earlier before in this video. Using a grid in web design makes it so much easier to create a clear hierarchy of content. And in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with overwhelming amounts of information, the last thing most of us want is to land on a cluttered website that's hard to navigate, filled with bold images and a bunch of other distractions. That's why Swiss designers don't simplify for aesthetic reasons, they do it because they know it works. The cognitive load theory, coined in 1988 by John Sweller, supports this idea, as it suggests that our working memory can only hold a small amount of information at one time, and that reducing unnecessary complexity helps maximize understanding and retention. And in fact, a study by Google has also shown that visually complex websites are consistently rated as less beautiful than their simpler counterparts. This brings us to another very key principle of Swiss web design, which is intuitive navigation. According to Hick's law, the more choices users face, the longer it takes them to make a decision. Now, this means designers need to very carefully consider how to present the most relevant options to avoid frustrating users and help them quickly find what they need. Now, take Google's search page, for example, with a single input box in the center and clearly presented search results. It's about as simple and clear as it gets, and it has become a global symbol of non-nonsense navigation. And now compare that to Zara's website, which is a tool for finding synonyms, and while it's incredibly useful, its layout is, well, let's say less efficient. The search bar is placed at the very top and isn't very noticeable, while an advertisement sits right below it, creating a somewhat confusing experience. So, when designing websites, it's essential to focus on creating concise categories, making clear drop-down menus, and using very familiar layouts that users intuitively understand. And speaking of familiar patterns, there's an interesting example of this online. The online tie retailer Skinny Ties. Now, before a redesign, their website didn't quite resemble a traditional e-commerce site. It felt crowded and navigation was very unclear. However, after they decided to redesign it and apply responsive design in early 2012, they sold 78% more units. Their new website looked much more open because it used white space and the images featured a single product with high-resolution pictures, creating a more appealing user experience. And lastly, Swiss Design cares a lot about efficiency. I mean, thinking about their punctual Swiss trains and their precise engineering, it's very safe to say that efficiency is a big part of their culture. And this same mindset carries over into their web design, where the goal is to remove unnecessary steps and make things easier for users. If you look at some of the most popular websites today, like Apple with its clean white space and easy to use navigation, or Dropbox, which uses clean layouts, minimal text, and prominent CTAs, it becomes very clear that the principles of Swiss design have become integral to modern branding and UX design, emphasizing the importance of clarity and making the user experience as smooth as possible. But now the time has come to look into another star of today's video, which is Scandinavian web design, which is also known for keeping things clean, minimal, and functional while still looking amazing. Now, Scandinavian design originally took off in the 1930s thanks to designers and architects like Joseph Frank, Alvar Aalto, and Arne Jacobsen. And it really borrowed a lot from the modernism movement, which emerged in the late 19th century, like keeping things simple with plenty of open space, designing for functionality first, and making sure everything stays affordable. And believe it or not, nature and weather also shaped Scandinavian design in a really big way. I mean, long winters and little to no sunlight led Nordic designers to look for ways to bring more warmth, light, and open spaces into their buildings. Also, historically, these countries didn't have a lot of resources, so if you were a creative spirit in the early 20th century and decided to express yourself by using some of your parents' leftover wood for some fancy window decorations, they probably wouldn't have been impressed. This is why across the Nordic countries you'll find clean line forms, simple shapes, and minimal ornamentation. There's even a Swedish term that summarizes this philosophy very well, and it's lagom, which means just the right amount or not too much, not too little. Scandinavians brought the same ethos online, blending simplicity and purpose to create practical and beautiful websites. And now let's dive a bit deeper into the main characteristics of Scandinavian web design to really understand why it's so effective. So first up, it's functionality, which I've mentioned quite a lot throughout this whole video. Now, Scandinavian design is highly user-centric, meaning that it always prioritizes user needs, behaviors, and pain points. This approach often includes extensive usability testing before launching any product whatsoever, and a good example of this is Spotify. It offers personalized recommendations and presents them through intuitive navigation. It's also common to use negative spaces quite a lot, and this design technique creates room for visitors to breathe and ensures that the focus remains on the main content, not on the background noise. And a great example of this is IKEA's website, where you can explore products without feeling overwhelmed by any clutter. Now, we're moving to simple typography. Like the Swiss, Scandinavians know that when it comes to fonts, being clean and simple is the way to go. So mixing a bunch of font styles is a big red flag for them. This style really embraces bold, larger fonts for headings or key information and smaller, lighter fonts for longer text, like this Electrolux site, a Swedish brand which has a clear typography hierarchy. But most importantly, fonts have to be readable, so there are no fancy, extravagant Belushi or CastroScript fonts in these designs. Scandinavian style is all about bringing a natural, earthy feel. That's why you'll often see nature images like plants or greenery included in their designs. And fun fact here, many Swedish designers also follow eco-friendly principles like performance optimization. I mean, they reduce resource use by compressing images, videos, and code for faster load times, like on the Vattenfall website. Or they use dark mode to reduce power usage, especially on OLED screens. Companies like Telia even host their websites on servers powered by renewable energy, helping lower their carbon footprint. So, by keeping things simple and focused, you're creating a design that's practical, affordable, and long-lasting, perfect for brands that want to look great without constant updates. And this answers the question of why Scandinavian design is so popular today. Not only does it never go out of style, but it's also incredibly versatile. Its simple aesthetic allows it to blend seamlessly with almost any style or era. And Hicks' law and cognitive load, two theories I've mentioned while talking about the Swiss design, are relevant to Scandinavians as well, so keeping things simple and clear is always a solid choice when it comes to user experience. And I know that by now you might be wondering, I mean, alright, so Swiss design is minimalistic and Scandinavian design is minimalistic, and one prioritizes functionality and the other does too, I guess. So what are the differences really? Well, while these two styles do have a lot in common, there are some key differences as well. Well, first, it's precision versus warmth. Swiss design is about order, precision, or sometimes abstraction, while Scandinavian design focuses on simplicity with warmth and connection to nature. And Swiss design also heavily emphasizes typography and the grid systems, whereas Scandinavian design focuses more on creating an inviting and relaxed experience through softer, nature-inspired elements. But it's important to note that modern websites often blend these styles, adopting a variety of elements that work best for them. For example, it's difficult to say that IKEA's website uses only Scandinavian or only Swiss design, as it actually incorporates features from both. Of course, I mean, I know that IKEA is Swedish, so don't throw Swedish meatballs at me for this, but I mean, it still uses both. But anyway, even though you've heard many arguments for keeping websites minimal, in this video, it's not the only way to make a site effective. Personally, I love minimalistic designs. They're undeniably easier to navigate, but at the end of the day, it all depends on the brand and its purpose. I mean, for example, while a minimalistic design is perfect for an online shop to guide visitors straight into making a purchase, a creative designer's portfolio might benefit from a bold, stylish look that showcases their skills and leaves room for a personal touch and personal branding. And culture factors also play a very significant role. I mean, take some of the Japanese websites, for instance. Some of them look pretty chaotic or even really outdated, I mean, to me, because of the densely packed text and tiny low-quality images and bright clashing colors. But I mean, they work because of this country's unique circumstances, like logographic characters that allow dense layouts, or the lack of italics and capital letters, which then limits the visual contrast and requires decorative solutions like different colors. Also, there are just not enough web fonts for non-Latin languages like Chinese and Japanese, so designers often rely on graphics rather than dynamic text. And there are probably many other factors that play a part in this as well. However, the most important thing is that these sites are still effective and do their job well. I mean, of course, that's not to say that there are no minimalistic sites like Muji, for example, which is a Japanese retailer, and their site is clearly influenced by Swiss design as well. Also, another great example is Indian websites, which, I mean, a lot of them can look outdated and even too simple at times, but I mean, they work well for their users. I mean, one reason for that is that India is a high context culture, meaning communication is implicit and nuanced, and this lets users process more information without feeling overwhelmed, which is reflected in web design, where sites present dense content-heavy information really upfront. Also, the Indian market is very price sensitive, so companies tend to opt for cost-effective designs. Meanwhile, public institution websites like banks and government services often keep older designs because, well, users are just familiar with them, and big changes could disrupt that comfort. So here, accessibility and functionality win over aesthetic, ensuring that the site works for 1.4 billion people across a very diverse landscape. But now coming back to Swiss and Scandinavian designs, and there are many lessons to take away here when building your own website, but if I had to boil this video down to 3 major tips, they would be these. So first, always have your users in mind. Build a website with intuitive navigation, clear call to action buttons, fast loading times, and responsive designs that work really well on all devices. Also, strive for the not too much, not too little principle. It's always better to provide fewer high quality images than, I mean, dozens of low quality ones that just don't go well together. And the same, of course, applies to text, colors, and other elements. And lastly, as I said, it's important to always consider your website's purpose and target audience to create something truly effective. Therefore, I mean, take these lessons as inspiration rather than strict rules. And speaking of something truly effective, check out this video if you want to know which websites were the most visited globally in 2024. Some of them were actually quite a surprise for me, so go watch it and see if you can guess the top 5. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this in the future. Now, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.